excited that you're all able to join here today. So we're going to get this started. I am Meredith. I am Keelabs Senior Marketing Manager. And before we kick it off, I just want to start the session today by acknowledging that Keelabs head office in Vancouver is on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and give thanks for their generosity and hospitality on these lands and waters. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. We also have Kim, our partnerships coordinator, helping us out today. So you might see her in the chat box or answering some of your technical questions. So feel free to say hello to Kim. If you're new to Keela, welcome. Keela is a complete nonprofit management software that helps you manage your donors, market your nonprofit, and most importantly, raise more money for your cause. And just before I briefly introduce our speaker today, I just have a couple housekeeping items to go over. So today's session will be about 50 minutes in length, followed by a Q&A at the end. And throughout the presentation, please feel free to write any additional questions that you have in the chat box or in the Q&A section, and we're going to get through as many as we can. And then speaking of the chat box, please remember to select everyone when you type so that everyone on the call can see your questions or your comments. And then finally, this webinar is being recorded and you will all receive access to the recording as well as Libby's slide deck before the end of the week. So with all of that out of the way, I am really excited to welcome Libby Berenson today. Libby is the co-founder and CEO of Genies, an innovative platform that provides nonprofit organizations with a vehicle to tap into new generation of donors and digitally upscale their giving process. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Libby.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. It's Tuesday. We just had a family day yesterday, so welcome after a long weekend. If you had any plans over the weekend, really excited to be here. Thank you so much, Keela, for hosting us. Keela is a great partner, and we hugely support the messaging and some of the the learnings that we share together to our beloved nonprofits and organizations we work with. So thank you so much for joining. So my name is Libby Berenson, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Genies. We'll talk a little bit about what that means soon. But you have joined today to talk about how technology is shaping giving, what's the future of giving will look like, and why nonprofit organizations and charities should care. And I just want to invite you to think about what is the answer to that long question? And it's actually easy. If you're here to just listen to one slide, this is a summary of what we're going to talk about. This is actually the answer to that question. So how does our technology shaping giving and why nonprofits should care? 4 pointers for you, and then we'll continue. So stay with me. Technology had a major impact on the way people give, and it made giving very convenient, accessible, and efficient. We all know that. So definitely social media campaigns made it easier for people to support causes that they care about. We also know that use of data and analysis and analytics have helped nonprofits to better understand their donors and make sure that their fundraising efforts are more effective and efficient. And nonprofits embrace technology and use it really strategically, and that allows them to attract more donors and increase their impact. So that's really an easy way to talk about what that answer is. And if you're wondering why I started with that slide, is actually I was looking for that answer. I was really curious what ChatGPT will tell me and how that chatbot will answer that question. And this is actually the answer that I received, which just shows how much, really accurate information that the robot can create, and how it's similar to our thoughts and how we see some of our, learnings from that nonprofit space and how incorporated giving is for the future. So that was really interesting for me to observe how a new chatbot that just launched early this year was able to answer that question. If you're wondering what ChatGPT is, you heard probably that word before just in the last month around you. It's a chat bot that was created to really predict the next word in a sentence based on lots of data and learnings. So really interesting how kind of we see this starting to integrate into pieces of information that we're dealing on a day-to-day basis. So let's start from the beginning. So as I said, I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of a company called Genies, which is a social gifting platform. Kind of in the past, I was, just before Genies, I was a director of operations in a company called Coho, which is a financial technology company, startup that really launched in Vancouver, BC, and grew to become now considered a unicorn in Canada. And being part of that growth really showed me the opportunities that we have with technology and how we can advance people's personal financials, but also transparency and trust, and how we can create that for audiences around us and engage our communities. I started my leadership and technology experience about 18 years ago as a military officer, being part of male-dominated environments and kind of breaking barriers and making sure that I could create something and create innovative ways to really break limits around me, and was really a part of what I did always. I'm also a personal coach and leadership coach, and been in technology for the last 18 years. So Genies, we created Genies really with the passion and skill of making sure that we have a new way to empower others to give. We work with nonprofit organizations and charities. They are allowed to invite their families and themselves to create wish lists of items, and it allows them to engage younger generations of donors to donate and create trust directly to their supporters. And that really is a new way for to engage and empower corporations as well as individual donors to give in a new transparent way. So really an interesting way to bring donors strategically and keep them engaged longer term. So what are we talking about today? And I always start with the why, the what, and the how. So let's talk about why should you care about new technology? Why is this important right now? Why is it everyone's talking about that? And why is it hard to adopt in industries like nonprofits, but also think about schools, education, or government, right? There are a lot of industries that is harder to change with new technologies. So why is it? What are some of the tools that you should know about that are coming your way? But what are you actually supposed to do with them? What do you actually need right now for your to prepare for that next step of transition? And then eventually, I like to talk about the how. What makes it easier for you to adopt into transition, especially to engage your team around it, and how to implement it so that it's easy, one step at a time, and it's sustainable for you as you continue growing. Okay, so just a reminder that your average age of a donor that you probably saw before and you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, the average age of a donor in Canada is 55 and in US is 64. That's just a reminder of the audience that you work with, the stakeholders that are around you. And you want to think about what can you do to engage the other ones, right? The other generations, what can you do to speak their language, and how they perceive you as a nonprofit that is planning to stay here for a long time and grow sustainably to help your and service your community. The other piece that I want to talk about is that it's not only the millennials and Gen Zs that we're talking about, but it's actually baby boomers and Generation X are also heavy adopters of technology. So starting from that kind of baseline of technology is used by everyone, and probably everyone in the room right now to tune in to Zoom are using some type of technology on the day-to-day, even more than you expected of yourself. So it's really interesting to see how the adoption is actually much more ingrained in all of us than what we think that will happen, and only young kind of people and generations will. And lastly, to understand by 2029, millennials will be outnumbering baby boomers. And I want you to think about in 2030, 30, millennials become around the age of 55 and Gen Zs become the 33, which means that they are more capable in terms of their professional life to contribute meaningfully to your nonprofit and charities, and kind of become these larger supporters naturally as they're progressing in their own personal life. So the question is, are you planning to stay relevant in the next 7 years? And I wanted to point that out is because when we're thinking about new technologies, we're imagining a future of 20 years from now, 10 years from now, but it's actually right now, and it's really close. So the question is, how do you prepare yourself to be relevant in 7 years and to continue being top of mind for your supporters and new supporters, right? Instead of me going into a lot of statistics and proving the concept of why it's important, I want to point you out to different resources that are might be really helpful for you to dive a little bit more deeper into these statistics and analytics around why new generations of donors are looking to give in a different way, what are some of the ways to engage them. And I really love to point out Keela's webinar from a while ago about the transfer of wealth to the new generations, as well as some ChatGPT really fun conversations that we had not a long time ago. So definitely check them out. And let's start with some buzzwords that you probably saw around you and you are curious to know what they are, and are they even relevant to you? What you should really notice around you. And here are some of them. Okay, so artificial intelligence and machine learning, which is really top of mind right now. Artificial intelligence is really the overall concept of machines learning the thought process of humans and how they are able to apply it to decision making. Machine learning is all about identifying patterns and creating the most efficient or accurate ways of thinking. So really concept that we can apply to a lot of things. You can probably notice them or think about you are probably using them day to day when you're thinking about Netflix and how you get recommendations, right? Recommendations of the next series to watch. They actually use different types of AI and machine learning tools behind the scenes to make sure that they recommend the right things for you. Augmented reality and virtual reality, how to visually perceive information in a new way, and how to create new worlds and universes around us, like metaverse here that you see at the bottom. Blockchain and cryptocurrency, these are technologies that allow us to create more transparency and trust around data and storing of data, where cryptocurrency specifically is built on blockchain. It creates really new opportunities for you to fundraise in a new way. So definitely something to check out around, are you ready for cryptocurrency, yes or no? And just other things around business intelligence and Internet of Things that might not be super relevant for you at the moment. Internet of Things is all about hardware communication. Something to check out. I definitely want to point you out to this resource on the right, where you can find a little bit more about what all these mean. I wanted to take this to a little bit more kind of relevant point for you. One last resource that I would share around this is some of these trends and new technologies might be more relevant for you than others. Something to watch for you to kind of innovate, and trends to watch. And this resource was really good at mapping how these new buzzwords might be relevant for the nonprofit technology soon to come, and what some of them are, how some of them are more impactful than others. Okay, so let's transition to what your stakeholders want. So you might not feel like these new technologies are relevant for you, but your stakeholders are interested in them and they're looking for them and they're first to adopt them. Your stakeholders might be your donors, your staff, your volunteers, and your corporate donors as well, right? Funders, supporters, community, social followers. They are looking for these new technologies and they're the first to adopt it. Why? Because they're looking for that ease of use, of course. They are looking for financial gain. How can I make my money more impactful? And how can I gain more with less, right? For example, prediction of stock prices. How can I gain more transparency and trust with the corporations and organizations that I interact with and I use? Security of data. They're looking for more secured ways to store their data. People are doing it for social status. They want to stay in the know. They want to show that, hey, I know what these new technologies are all about, and I'm using them, and want to prove to others around them. And eventually, yes, they want to use it for impact because they're looking for ways to leverage less resources for more impact. So what will that mean for a donor? What can they use that is not as wasteful now than it was before? So this is what your stakeholders are looking for. I wanted to imagine, this is a really interesting exercise to imagine how will the future of giving look like. I asked people around what do they think, what in our kind of craziest imagination, what will the future of giving look like? And interestingly enough, it was really hard to break some of the barriers and limitations of what we think we're able to accomplish in this world. That is very physical. And these are some of the ideas that already exist and we already found. So maybe it's a robot for collecting donations. Maybe it's drones that are able to ship necessities worldwide. Maybe they are machines that are helping with healthcare or cryptocurrency as we know right now. But what if it's cards, online digital cards that are given to families in need or to organizations to use for services? So there are a lot of new ways of giving. And this is not the future. This is actually right now, where the future, I encourage you to imagine what will happen. What's the next step after that? Nobody really knows, but I really encourage you to think, what will that look like? It's a really fun exercise to imagine. But let's look at our timeline, and that will be our focus today, is in the nonprofit world, especially in our sector, how technology adoption kind of occurred, how it progressed over time, and where are we in some of these steps forward. So if you think about some of our past, our tools, or resources that were available to us, and I'm an older millennial, so I remember all these on the bottom left corner really well. And these are some of the things that we used before. And when we're talking about kind of the first step of adoption, and these are not like accurate first, second, third, fourth, but I wanted to give you like overall steps that you can relate to that might contain different types of elements. So door-to-door donations, landlines, using landlines to reach donors, mailing for donations and for thank you notes, using checks for our payments. We actually see nonprofits and organizations working with us through some of these means still, paying for online services like Genie's through checks, or I received just recently from the holiday season from large charities an ask for mailing during mailing for donations. So it's still happening, and I encourage you to think about, are you still using some of these resources that are available for you? The second step was when we started creating websites for ourselves. So using social media to reach our new audiences, to amplify the brand, and use emails for marketing or from communication internally and externally. That was kind of the next step of adoption of technology. This is when Excel sheets started happening, right? And we can start tracking our volunteer hours, our staff using Excel sheets. So that's kind of the step number 2. Step number 3 is a little bit more where you would find corporations and companies around you at is adopting online platforms that are adopting cloud, storing data in the cloud, which you probably heard about, using a lot of online tools to create more efficiency within the company. Influencers as a way to amplify the voice of the brand and create credibility with audiences. So think about YouTube influencers, Instagram influencers. This is the new way of marketing and engaging audiences that are outside of your immediate community. And that is really kind of booming right now, where you probably see it around you. Entrepreneurship, I specifically put it here in step 3, because it's really interesting to see how we teach our kids. And I'm involved in so many different programs for young kids in schools, as well as high schools, and of course, universities around entrepreneurship programs. But the reason that it's important is because that just shows how we train our new generations about thinking about change and how they can problem solve and how they can be the ones breaking barriers and thinking about more efficient and better ways of creating ideas and doing day-to-day tasks. So entrepreneurship is really a big trend right now that you should definitely be aware of. It just shows you how we change the resistance to change and how we're more adaptable now as a society, and our future and our kids are going to be even better at that. Data analytics, security, and connection that you definitely should be aware of. Connection means that you can open up your doors now, not only to your local community, but national and definitely globally as well. So we have an opportunity to engage remotely, remote supporters now more than ever. And then step number 4 are all these new technologies that we talked about, the buzzwords, right? And what I wanted to point out is that your stakeholders are somewhere in between 3 to 4. They are experiencing and they want to be in the know. They want to take these steps. Some industries are easier to change and of course easier to adapt and adopt. But some are really hard to take these first steps and change because of limitations of government or restrictions, processes that they have to be adhered to. And so think about, when maybe you can share in the chat, where do you think you are? Where do you think your nonprofit and charity is currently? How do you feel you're internally using these technologies? Are you somewhere between 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3, 4? How much did you adopt already? And it feels like we're really at the race against time. And if you're wondering why was the first picture around people as part of a mud race, when I was starting to reflect about this presentation, I was really that was where my mind went to. It feels like we're on a land that we're not really sure how to get to the next step. It's hard to maneuver, it's hard to find your ground. And it really feels like everyone's is part of a race against time to catch on with these new technologies and figure out how to use them and how to also implement it within internally so that everyone can adopt it easily and change becomes received and encouraged within the organization. And sometimes it feels like this. It feels like we tried and it didn't work, or we didn't get the buy-in from our teams above, teams below us. And it really feels like we're not sure how to move on from there. The reason that it's hard, especially in the nonprofit sector, is we have this gap between what we imagined the virtual world would be and how we can imagine all these universes around us and the physical, actual human work that you're doing day to day. And that's very hard to grasp. How it's hard to connect these dots about what can make my processes easier when I'm actually dealing with day-to-day people or anyone that I serve that really need help, which is not imaginary, it's not in the cloud, it's physical and it's there, and I need to figure out how to deal with it, right? So it's super hard, specifically in these types of support system and these types of organizations, because they don't feel like it might connect with them, it might not provide value, and it's also hard to imagine how well these processes, now physical processes, will convert to something very technology driven. So what you actually need is, you need to think about how to reduce money, how to reduce your waste that you're spending on. It can be money, it can be time, efforts, staff. So think about, you actually need to save money in order to make it more efficient for you. How can you take and adopt these new technologies to make it much more kind of available and contributing to your mission? You want to save money, you want to attract new donors. That's something that you definitely need. You want faster deliverables. You want things to happen faster and results to be available for you faster than before. You want to continue nurturing connections and in your community. You want to continue working on brand and marketing. You want to outreach to new supporters around you. You do need partnerships and integration, right? And I definitely put time off here because, as I know, and I work a lot with the nonprofit sector, a lot of people, nonprofit professionals, are known to be burned out and not having that time for themselves to take time off, having too many things on their plate. Something to look for as, how can you use these new technologies in order to provide a little bit more comfort for you and your staff to continue sustainably to work on your mission and your cause. So here, where you want to be in this moment for the next 7 years, this is where you want to transition. And that's one step further. You don't need to think about the buzzwords right now, but you want to start thinking about how you prepare yourself for the next step to come. And to prepare yourself is really to focus on step number 3. What step number 3 can provide to you? How can that contribute to you so that you can continue building on your mission and utilizing resources around you so that you can prepare for that next step after that? So what should you do to be able to take a step forward? And that's what I recommend. I recommend focusing on efficiency, brand, and trust. And let's talk about these 3. When you talk about efficiency, it's all about internal communication, internal processes, people, anything that you can do internally within your organization that makes your job easier, your processes more effective and efficient. And time saved, time and money that is saved from there is something that you can utilize further. When you talk about brand, we talk about how to outreach for new communities, new supporters around us. What can we do with some of these new tools that are available for us to engage new donors? And then trust is all about continuing to develop trust with, once we engaged new donors, let's say, or supporters, how do we continue to develop trust with them so that they stay with us longer term? And here are some examples. So let's talk about these 3. So from efficiency perspective, think about your financial management. How do you currently do payroll, tax receipts? What do you leverage for that? For internal communication, are you still using email between your team? Is that efficient? How long do you need to wait for each email to arrive or coordinate a meeting for that? Volunteer management tools, grant applications, scheduling tools. I cannot say how long it takes to schedule one simple meeting when you're, especially in a remote setting, when you're trying to coordinate a Wednesday at 10:30 and what time zone and so on. So there are a lot of scheduling tools, which is an easier change that you can really think about that will eliminate a lot of back and forth. supplies for families or the people and communities that you serve, data gathering, and document management as well. Think about signing agreements, signing contracts, sending documents back and forth, saving them. Where is that hosted? What will happen if it's hosted on a specific computer, if that computer is not longer available for you? So there's a lot of kind of conversation here about internal processes. What do you do day to day that you can start thinking and thinking differently about? So here are some examples, and I'm going to touch on tools that are just for an example perspective. We're not affiliated by anyone. We're not recommending any of these tools specifically. I wanted to give you a sense of what is available to you. Just give you a few examples to explore, and definitely search for what works for you best. So on the top right, you will see something called QuickBooks, which is basically all financial management in one tool. There's payroll options there, APAR, your expenses, reports, forms, everything kind of available there online. On the bottom right, you will see a Calendly tool, which is something that I use personally always, that allows you to schedule in 2 minutes instead of 15 or even an hour. On the top left is something called Slack that you might have heard about. Some of you, we actually see nonprofits starting to use that tool. You can use any other tool that is out there. However, this is for internal communication. So what about you and your team communicating really quickly through chat box and text, where things can be decided really quickly, and you don't need to wait for a long time for notifications to happen. And then on the bottom left, a signing tool, a legal tool online where you can host agreements and send to external stakeholders, and all the signing stage happening for you. So removing really a lot of paper and communications with each other, scanning. All these tasks that seem really minimal take a lot of time, and you need to start thinking about how you can improve them. From a brand perspective, so let's talk about external facing communications and outreach to new supporters. Start thinking about your design and tone. So one of the things that I really encourage nonprofits to do is think about how you are perceived with younger generations. How are they looking at your website in your processes, and do they associate what type of terms they're associating with you? Is that you don't want to be considered old school in their eyes, right? Old school may be really good for some things and very credible. From a design perspective, if you are looking to engage younger generations, you do want to use some of the design elements and even the tone of your messaging kind of so that it's perceived a little bit more forward thinking, more adaptable, more flexible and creative. So really reflect on your way that you present yourself, even visually, as an organization. Automated outreach. There's a lot of tools that allow you to automate and outreach on scale to different donors and high net worth individuals. So that could be a really helpful tool that allows you to do a lot of communication right there in a short amount of time. Event management, influencers, and video conversations. Leveraging that to be the voice of your organization can be really helpful for you longer term. Donor research. There are interesting tools that allow you to research high net worth individuals, their interest in causes, and what are their typical kind of donation would be. So might allow you to research a little bit more to target your audience a little bit better in your outreach. Recruiting tools. Some of the recruitment that you do for staff in the nonprofit is really important, because if you're using recruiting tools, first, it might make things more efficient, but also help you outreach to different generations and types of staff that you want to types of talent that you want to adhere to. If you need more technology-driven talent, you need that knowledge within. You definitely should use recruitment tools because they are using that day to day. PR, press releases, amplifying your mission. There are tools for that too. And SEO, search engine optimization. So thinking about how you are ranked within Google or any search mechanisms so that you're appeared quickly for your audiences as they search for your cause. Examples of that. So kind of in the bottom right, you will see some influencers that we have used before that have talked about Genies and how to donate on Genies. It was really an interesting kind of practice for us to see how others talk about our mission. On the top right, you'll see that tool that we're using, something called Copilot AI, that allows you to outreach automatically within LinkedIn, especially for kind of larger donors or corporate donors. That might be really helpful to do at scale. And then on the top left, a design tool that you probably are already using, or some of you might use it, called Canva, which allows you to quickly design social media posts, website designs, blogs and videos, and so on. And at the bottom left, something that was really interesting for me, and I used it before, something called Textio that allows corporations and companies and nonprofits as well to align their text and content to be more inclusive and resonate with different types of audiences, so that it sounds it's really available and engaging different types of audiences and cultures and ethnicities and genders. So a really interesting tool for DI and recommendations. And lastly, trust. When we talk about trust, is you engaged new supporters. Now, how do you continue developing trust with them? How do you make sure that they see you as a transparent and value-driven organization? They know what's happening with their money. Their contribution, maybe volunteering time, is really meaningful. So creating and maintaining these relationships is really important. So you definitely want to continue gathering data and storing it in a way that is secure. You want to start analyzing that data so that it helps you make decisions. Did we target the right audience? Did we use the right tools? Is our data shows something about the people that we support? Can we support more, right? Creating surveys and feedback, and thinking about outside of the box, and then using a form, let's say in Google Forms, which is a great step forward. But what else is out there to engage our communities? People want to be part of change. People want to be part of influence of how you're progressing. They want to contribute to your cause. So they are willing to give you their opinions and feedback. Stakeholder experience. I want to give you an example here around a corporation that wants to engage their employees in giving back. So what is your stakeholder experience for them? How are you allowing them to contribute to you? Do you have a donate now button then that every employee can go and donate to you? That's great, that's fantastic. But then how do I know as a corporation what my impact was? Do you provide an impact report for me? How do I know then what can I present outside externally for me as a corporation to showcase my brand as a company that does social good, that does give back to the community? So what are some of the processes that allow me to track my employee engagement and engage my teams around? So completely thinking about that user flow will really help you think about your stakeholders. What do they need, and how do you adapt to their needs? Direct communication lines, continuing to open these lines of communication so that you have maintained a personal relationship and personal human touch with your messaging forward. Partnerships and integration are a great way to create trust and credibility. You want to be associated with larger either organizations or charities or organizations that have an aligned vision values as similar to yours. People and stakeholders love to see integrations and partnerships because it also symbolizes that you are leveraging resources in a better way. Donor management and CRM, things like Keelabs, for example, which is a complete nonprofit management tool, which definitely should check out. And appreciation, thank yous. How do you send your thank you notes? If I receive a mail in my mail, a thank you note from a charity that I've donated 3 years ago, I still don't feel like it's personal enough for me to continue contributing to them, where I feel my contribution can be much more meaningful in a different way. So think about how you appreciate your supporters already. So here are some examples, and that's kind of the last cycle of the examples here, and definitely reach out to us if you want to learn more. Feedback loops or surveys that could be really quick to set up online. That's the top right. The bottom right is all about analytics and how you can understand trends about your audiences, demographics. Maybe your supporters are coming from a specific demographic that you should continue engaging more, where they are located, how can you create events that are specifically for them. It gives you a lot more information. On the top left, you'll see something called Intercom, which is a communication tool with your supporters and your users. And at the bottom left, a video option, right? Think about sending a video to your supporters or large donors in a very personal way. It might take a little bit of time, but it actually provides much more value as sending the video that people perceive video right now much more than anything else. So definitely look for ways to integrate video into your appreciation. Okay, so let's talk about how to. So how to adopt and how to sustain. And that's the last portion. I wanted that to be very specific and easier for you to implement. So when you're thinking about adoption and that transition, you have to start thinking about yourself first. Are you ready for it? Do you understand why you're doing this? Is that just because others are telling you to do, you probably should not do it, but you actually need to reflect on yourself and your organization and think about what is your mission? Where do you see your organization in 7, 10 years, 5 years? And where do you want to see your organization? And start with yourself with the question, are you ready for that change? That change doesn't have to be a big change. I love the picture on the left that shows these small steps are much more meaningful than the big steps that you're imagining that you might need to do. So really starting small is the key here. And of course, after you reflect on yourself, then you can continue and engage and get your team excited about some of these transitions, and then your stakeholders will be impacted too. So how to adopt? Get ready for the journey. Remember your why. Is that because you want your process to be a little bit more efficient, or you want to engage new donors in your community, or you just want to sustain, make sure that your staff is ready, or your staff is a little bit more available to do other things than the day-to-day tasks that are might be very manual for them. And then involve the team. And there are 3 components here. Is definitely, as a group, identify the problem. You really want, as any change management process, you want to identify the waste, but you also want people to be part of that change. It's hard for people to be, people are resistant to change, that's known. However, if they are part of it and they're being kind of passing through that, people are actually proud of that change and want to put a little bit more motivation around it to say, hey, I was part of making that transition, and this is what happened, and these are the results that I'm really excited about. So you really want to engage your team in that transition. Collaborate to find the right solutions. the point here is that not everything you should consider. You should talk about how AI is currently impacting your organization, because that might not be relevant at your stage. Find the right solutions for you. You might not need a lot. Maybe it's 2-3 changes that are easy to adopt, and it already creates, these are the low-hanging fruits that you already create a lot of impact from. And then assign implementation. What I like to do with change is having teams separate into working groups or working teams. That creates a lot of great social interactions and motivation for people to accomplish results together. So assign implementation to your teams to kind of move on and take it from there. Prioritize. Small changes are the ones that you want to focus on first. Get external help if you need to. If you feel like you really don't have the time to spend on any of this, I really encourage you to get some external help. Prioritize that with your funding, with your time, to get even a sense of what are these small things that we can do that will already reduce some of our time internally. And get excited. So think about how it really helps you amplify and helps with your vision, values, and impact that you're doing forward. Maybe it will allow you to engage new corporate donors, for example, right? And how to sustain, I really encourage everyone to try it yourself. So all these tools might seem a little bit overwhelming. It doesn't have to mean much. I do encourage you to try it yourself. Once you try it yourself, you understand some of its magic, and why this was chosen for your organization. And you might identify that it's actually not as valuable, and that's okay too, and that's easy to transition back. Get team feedback frequently. So create some cadence around conversations with the team, where you can ask what processes have changed, what have improved, what did we have improve already, and what is still blocking us, what is still a barrier that creates more work for us. And we definitely don't want to create that in our environment. Remember, the why is that because of efficiency, brand, trust. What are you trying to accomplish? Leverage supporters' feedback. Like I said, people want to be part of the change. So ask supporters around you. They want you to be successful. So they want to contribute to your transition and these changes that you might experience. Give it about 6 to 12 months. Some changes are actually as easy as 1-2 days or even a week. Maybe it's a scheduling tool where you can say, hey, everyone, we are starting to use this for scheduling, and that transition might take a week. But some, of course, might take a few months. Prepare for that. Just set that expectation for yourself and for the team that it's a process that might take a while, but definitely look at that future of what it will create, what value it will bring after. And measure for return on investment. So really try to quickly move from something that does not create that value for you. That process of change, it might seem easier for me than anyone in this room, because we learned how to adopt change, how we learned how to be resilient to changing things on a daily basis, just because that's our reality as a startup. And that is hard. And we weren't like this before. But once you try it several times, you actually understand that change might be really helpful for people's professional development, might be helpful for practice change as you continue to evolve as an organization. So really quickly identifying the results of it, the return on investment, and then moving on from there. It's a really interesting, good practice. Okay, so I want to close with just reflecting on the future of giving is actually now. It's not really in the future. I want to encourage everyone to step forward and prepare for a faster, more adaptable, flexible, connected, and creative world, so that you can find yourself at the top of a mountain and kind of seeing what the horizon is and seeing and preparing yourself for the next phase there. Encouraging you to check out some of additional resources that we have provided for you. It's in the chat for you as well. We are doing what we do because we love what we do. We are passionate about providing an easier solution for nonprofits. And we encourage you to continue doing your work. We're here for you to make it easier. And thank you so much for being part of this. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Wow, thank you so much, Libby. That was, chock full of such valuable information that I hope people are ready and excited to go out there. So we did get a few questions come in. We got a question about cryptocurrency, actually, and how do you overcome the fears and myths against cryptocurrency, and how can you message it to donors that they should adopt it instead of maybe be afraid of it?
Interesting. Cryptocurrency, as one of these new technologies, actually is more progressive than the rest. So it's actually more progressive than the AIs that you hear about right now, the ChatGPT. So cryptocurrency is a little bit more kind of known in the audience right now. So it's actually not as hard as you think. There are a lot of new tools that are created for fundraising cryptocurrency, specifically for nonprofits. Encourage you to check them out and find and research what are some of these tools are. And from a donor perspective, you also need to understand that our specific donors are early adopters. Some of them are late adopters, and some need a little bit more education around it. But what you want to do is you want to capture these early adopters as to provide proof of concept, to showcase what have you done with these initial funds that you received as cryptocurrency, because the impact then from that will help show late adopters that it's possible, that it's actually very helpful for you and your organization and your impact forward. So how to adopt it, really check these different tools that might be available for you there. Reach out to us if we can help with any of that. But how to adopt it is actually pretty easy. Once you have a donate button on your website, you're already allowed that to happen. But really focus on your brand and outreach towards that early adopters, because they are waiting for you to open that option for them. They're waiting for you for their crypto dollars to give to charities around, and they're looking for the charities that are already ready for them to accept it. And then you leverage that to say, this is what we did with these funds, this is our impact. And that's how you encourage later adopters to say, hey, now you can re-engage as well to help us amplify that impact as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I love that early adopter and late adopter terminology that you used. And I feel like everybody on this call with these tools emerging now, like ChatGPT, that has really taken off, you're all kind of early adopters for a lot of these things just by being here today. So that kind of filters through all of these tech themes. Okay, so our next question was, you had mentioned automated outreach, and we have somebody asking if you can give a couple examples of automated outreach tools that could reach new donors.
Of course. So one thing that I love using is what I actually shared today is something called Copilot. So it's basically an automated bot that allows you to automate LinkedIn messages. So we all know that LinkedIn is one of the biggest professional social media out there that allows you to connect professionally to anywhere and to anyone. What's hard on LinkedIn is actually sending messages every day. You also have a limit there, and it takes a long time to send each message. So something like Copilot AI, there are other tools, allows you to actually automate some of the drip campaigns, so messages, first message, second message, third message, that you can send to a leads list. So you can send to similar type of connections that you have on LinkedIn and send them a message directly and re-engage them after the first message, second message, and third message. And after they replied, you can actually kind of continue that conversation forward. So it's not, you're doing it without losing the personal touch and connection, which is really helpful in that way, and allows you to create thousands of connections in days or weeks, right? So definitely check out different types of outreaching tools. This is just one. that we're using personally. But if you can just search for it, and you will find plenty that are working for you. Okay. And then is that the same question about the scheduling tools?
Yeah. So they had kind of mentioned scheduling tools on social media and those kinds of things as well.
That will save you a lot of time for your marketing team to schedule posts and social media articles, blogs, kind of later on, and already prepare them for the month. So imagine how much time it's going to save from them to prepare for it if they can all schedule it and automate it for them. So really, there's a lot of manual tasks that we're doing day to day. If you just observe for a few days with a notebook, you will see that you identify already a lot of opportunities to save on a lot of time that you're spending every day.
Yeah, I think that theme of, never enough time in the day is something we hear all the time from our nonprofit friends. And I used to work for nonprofits as well. And it's always something that I struggled with. And there's these tools are such an incredible resource to be able to take away things so that you can invest your time in doing the things that a computer can't do.
Exactly.
Okay, so our next question, we got a question about boards, actually board members. So how would one overcome resistance to technology that may come internally, particularly from resistant board members? How can we encourage or justify the costs of new and unknown tech?
Great question. And interestingly enough, when you think about spending money and funds on integrating new technology, a lot of people forget that the whole point of that is actually minimizing cost and minimizing waste that is happening because of that. So it's all about showcasing what will some of these investments create, and down the line, how much work it's actually going to eliminate, and how much better your processes and much more efficient processes will turn out to be for your organization. Some of the things that we talk about with our organizations and nonprofits that we work with is you want to keep your cash donations and donor engagement, the large donors that you have, the large supporters, you want to keep their money as much as possible for your programs, for the progression of your organization, for operational costs, right? For staff, to keep your staff, and you want to keep that for longer time. So what can you do to eliminate some of the costs that you're already spending on manual work that you might not need to do? And that really makes sense to the board members. So when we talk with executive directors or board members of organizations, they understand that really quickly, where we want to keep the unrestricted funds that we have towards our programs and growth, while really reducing a lot of the spend on the day-to-day manual work, because this is what we're used to do, because that's what we're doing for the last 10, 20 years, 40 years. That down the line makes much more sense. So for them, that really clicks. I hope that clicks for you too.
Yeah, it's like that cliche of like time is money, right? And time really is money. And when you start thinking about things that way, you want to think about how you invest your time, right?
Exactly.
Okay, I think we have time for maybe one more, and then we will kind of conclude the webinar. But how do we manage using more technologically advanced tools to reach new audiences while still having an audience that might not be as tech savvy? So this person's asking, how can we justify an investment in tech when so many of our donors still prefer to make offline donations or get direct mail?
Great question. What's interesting is I really encourage you to test things out and start with small things. For example, what if you would send a thank you video to your supporters that you consider do not really adopt technology so much? What if you send them a video of a thank you? How would they react? And you want to ask their reaction. Did you enjoy it? Did you like that video? This is a small change. It doesn't need a lot of implementation time or change management tools to be able to transition. But even these small interactions with your let's say late adopter donors might spark that interest from these donors to continue and being involved as part of that change. So I promise you that they would actually really enjoy seeing a video from you, sending a thank you note. Remember that maybe they're not there to adopt, the latest technologies, the VRs or the metaverse yet, but they know how to use their phones. They know how to watch a video. They're already adapted to it. So leverage what they already know in order to create that feeling of you're there with them. You're in some of their progression through time and their race against time, but you're there and meeting them kind of where they already know, and take them on that ride with you. So I hope that makes sense, but I would say start with smaller things while you continue developing that longer term, more innovative solutions for yourself.
Great, that is a great tip. Start small but think big, I guess, kind of is where we all kind of are. So that kind of concludes the session for today. We're at time, but thank you so much again, Libby, for bringing such incredible insights today. I hope that everybody on the webinar is leaving today feeling empowered and confident to either start or continue leveraging technology to advance your missions. Before we go, I just wanted to let everyone know that there will be a very short survey that will pop up right after the session. It should only take you about 20 seconds to complete, and we would all greatly appreciate hearing your feedback. Our next Keelabs webinar is called Where Did Everyone Go? Volunteering and Civic Engagement in the Nonprofit Sector, with Bruce McDonald from Imagine Canada and Megan Conway from Volunteer Canada. It's taking place on March 7th, and Kim has put the link to register in the chat, so I hope you can all come and check that out. So thank you again, Libby. Thank you to everyone on the call, and we will see you at the next Keelabs webinar.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.